Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I wanted to take just a minute on this podcast episode to tell you a little bit about the online course that we are offering now, the BIT Course 2.0, Understanding How and Why Bits Function. You can find it at the website, thebitcourse.com, which will be linked in the show notes. This is a very comprehensive course. We've got two different versions. There's a masterclass version where weekly we have live calls and go over the modules and the study guide. That course has been running 25 to 30 hours over the course of 7 weeks. If you take that version, you're also eligible to go through our BIT certification program and take that test. It's at no additional cost if you want to add consulting about bits to your repertoire of body work or whatever else you might be doing. We also will have an evergreen version that you can take anytime you work at your own pace. It is less expensive. It's also a lot less content. You don't have the weekly Zoom calls with me. Those are going about 2 to 2.5 hours each week. So the masterclass course winds up 25, 30 hours long. The evergreen course you're going to do in 12 to 15, something like that. So check it out. You can go to thebitcourse.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get a 30-minute video on the foamy mouth and all of the implications of that, as well as 5 or 6 articles that I've written regarding bits. Get a feel for the content. This will absolutely be some of the best money and time you have ever spent on your horsemanship journey, I assure you. And it is not discipline specific. We cover just about every aspect of the horse world that you can think of.
Our guest today is Miss Gwynn Turnbull. She is probably best known in the Western world for being the producer, director, and one of the stars of the Californios DVDs, also Tapadero and some others. They put on a big competitive roping in the traditional skills. She's done clinics and a lot of other things throughout the world. She's also a writer, has a website, and just a really good source of information on the traditional Californio skills and a whole lot more, as we will discuss today. So how are you this morning, Ms. Gwynn?
I'm good. I'm grateful that you had me on.
Well, one of my favorite things about this podcast is it gives me cause to reach out to people that I have known about and respected for a long time, but probably never would have bothered if it weren't for this outlet. So you're definitely one of the ones on that list. I don't know how long ago y'all put out the Californios series, but it seems like it's been 10, 12, 15 years since I watched that stuff, and there's some scenes and all from it that are still burned into my head. So that was really quite the undertaking and the project, I'm sure, or projects.
It was, yeah. I think, let's see, I think it came out in 2008. I filmed it over the course of 3 years on, 6 or 7 different ranches in California in the Great Basin. And I was the everything, I was the director of photography. I was the director. I was the producer. I was the editor. I was the sound mixer. We kind of laugh when we look at the credits because we just kept listing my name. But yeah, labor of love, 80 hours of footage condensed into, an hour and 43 minutes. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but it was, I'm not going to say it was fun. It was challenging and then, of course, ultimately rewarding. Not necessarily financially rewarding. I mean, we always joke and say, how many people want to learn how to brand calves, but I really wanted to kind of record a way of life, before it passed into history. So I think we accomplished that. And there's some skills there and some interesting stuff too, as well, for folks.
For sure. And I don't know what things look like in California, but there seems to be kind of a ranch roping resurgence going on and a greater interest in stockmanship and that sort of stuff, low stress cattle handling and all. So there really is a practical aspect to all of that stuff as well. Plus, if your kid's out back with a roping dummy in front of him, he's not out on the roads doing stupid things, right? So lots of good that can be wrung out of all of that still.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the roping, the competitive roping I put on for 13 years, and the videos that I did, that was one of many chapters of my life, and I think it enriched my life, and I think there was a lot of value in it. Good times, bad times, just like that's just life. But all in all, I'm glad I did it, and I stopped having the Californios. I think I stopped it in 2012, and 13 years is a long run, but I think the takeaway there is everything has a life, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I wanted to be respectful of that. So I wanted to kind of end on a upswing, not wait until it was forced to change, with the changing of the times. So I think I accomplished that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I guess let me get into that in a minute, but I wasn't aware that y'all were doing the competition so long before the videos. I kind of thought the order was reversed there. So we'll get into that in a minute.
Sure.
We do like to start everybody off with our lightning round questions, and I have changed these up and the order up a little bit for you. So these are for points and prizes, so you want to be on your A game here. So, Miss Gwynn, what is your favorite way to relax?
I go to the top of my hill on a warm sunny day, and I lay down in the grass and look at the clouds and try to think about all the magical times I've had in my life.
Morning?
That'd be my favorite.
Yes,
go ahead.
Well, that actually, I have another question that is, where is your happy place? But I guess we've two birds with one stone on that one. So,
yeah.
Morning or evening?
That would depend on mentally what I'm trying to do. I certainly have more energy in the morning, and if I have to do any tasks that require a lot of mental acuity, that would be morning. And yet I find the evenings is a great time to reflect, and I feel a little bit more expansive in the evenings, where I can take in kind of a bigger picture and try to figure out what I might have learned that day, epiphanies I might have had. So I'd have to say both, but for different reasons.
So sort of action in the morning and philosophy and reflection in the evening.
Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Cats or dogs?
Oh boy, don't make me pick. I had a dog I've had a couple of those lifetime dogs, and lost my dog. It'll be 10 years ago, I believe, and still not recovered from that. But so I don't currently have a dog, though I love them desperately. My lifestyle doesn't really lend itself to them at this time, but cats, I got a bunch of old feral cats outside that I feed out of sympathy, and one made his way into the house. I don't know how he accomplished that, but he kind of runs the deal. So I really like them both equally, for different reasons.
Okay. So can you lay hands on most of these feral cats, or they're porch pirate type cats?
Most of them are porch pirates. Yeah, and the natural attrition where I live on Hambright Creek, and a creek is kind of the natural thoroughfare for predators. So they usually only last 6 months or so before they vanish. I think the coyotes and the bobcats probably get them. I try to give them as much refuge and care as I can, but
life happens. Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite beverage?
I get pretty upset if I don't get my coffee in the morning. That's my morning routine, is kind of a ceremony. So I would probably say coffee, water to sustain me, but coffee for pleasure.
I have to say this is one of those questions there, particularly given the audience and the people that I'm talking with. I would have figured that was going to be a question that was about 90% coffee drinkers, and it isn't close to that. It's probably 20% coffee drinkers and 80% something else. So
no, we don't.
I kind of thought it was a throwaway question, but then I get a little bit intrigued with the unexpected answers that get there.
Yeah.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
I tend to be decisive.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because I can't remember who said it, but it was a conversation about directing film, which we'll get into at some point. But they said a good director, a good director is someone who's decisive, can make decisions quickly, but changes those decisions slowly and methodically. And a bad director is someone that makes decisions slowly and methodically, but changes them quickly. And that kind of resonated with me because I understand where they're coming from.
I think that could apply to a lot more than directing films too.
Yes.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Sometimes. Half the pizza.
Just not your half.
It depends. It depends on what's the other half, right? That's a funny one.
If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Well, I think it would be neat to be able to fly. However, I think I probably do that when I ride. I think it's as close as I'll get to flying, because I'm moving through the air, but I'm not touching the ground. And so I would say that I probably already achieved that to some degree. There's just muscle and bone and blood beneath me and living thing. And I think that's different than driving a car or even walking on the earth myself. So I think it removes me from the earth in such a way that when I ride, I feel like I'm flying. So.
Okay. Bay or sorrel?
Bay, and a lot of my horses are sorrel. I don't know how that happened, but bay. I always thought that bay was one of those colors that was so beautiful and rich and had such depth, but it was so common that we took it for granted, and that if the tables were turned and you only got a bay every once in a while, it would be the premier. Everyone would want one. So that's an interesting dynamic.
So I'll just tell you with this question, this is another one of the really surprising ones for me. I thought that was kind of a throwaway. It would be 50-50, and it's not even close. It's about 90% people preferring bay horses, but picking sorrel horses more for performance, or saying just what you said. My best horse is a sorrel, or I've won more on a bunch of sorrels, but I just really like the bay. And I had no clue that was going to be that lopsided. So I don't know what that means. It is interesting because I really would have thought that was going to be 50-50, and it's not close.
I raised a bunch of most of the horses I have, I raised. And so I think genetically there was just predisposition to sorrel there. So I'm not sure how that played out with me, but I'm attracted to different colors, and but once again, it's all on the surface. Ultimately we see what they are on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And I always just nail it down to bay or sorrel because that's the two most common. But is there another, like my ultimate is a dapple gray with dark points? That's just the most beautiful color for me. And then I love buckskins as well. And
that's interesting.
So do you have another runs or
Well,
paints or anything like that you throw in there?
you know, I love a nice buckskin horse. I mean, I've got one or two. I do love that color. I don't know why. Um, I think it's interesting that you mentioned gray because, you know, that dark dapple with the dark points, it's fleeting, right? You know, you only get it so long and then they white out. So enjoy it while you got it, right? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And I've actually got a colt that I've bred. He's coming to right now, and he was born a buckskin, he's out of a Bayron stallion and a Palomino mare. So I'm not exactly sure how he got a buckskin out of that. But then as he's getting older, he seems to be running out. So he may be the only buckskin roan stallion I've ever seen at this point. But like I said, by the time he's 5 or 6, you may not have any idea he was ever buckskin. We'll just have to see.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, now I'm down to what is your happy place? So is it that hill, or would there be another place you would describe?
Drove out trees in the fall of the year, the backside of a trail that goes around to Ocean Lake, just north of Jackson, Wyoming. And if you ride through it in the fall of the year and the sun is just right, the air turns gold with those leaves. And it's what I think heaven might be. So I had the opportunity to be there on multiple occasions, and I always had the same timeless feeling there. So I suspect that would be a happy place for me.
Okay. And then I've got a little bit more food questions. So are you a cook?
Sometimes. Yeah. When I was married, I cooked a lot. And got a divorce 1.5 years ago, and I'm single now. I don't cook quite as much as I used to, but no, I mean, I enjoy it. I wouldn't say I don't live for it. I enjoy wonderful food. It's prepared well, and kind of the communion that goes with that. So it's not that I'm not opposed to it, but I got away from it a little bit this last little while.
Do you have a favorite meal?
Skyline chili is pretty high up the list. It's kind of it's a meat chili that almost, the sauce with it almost tastes like a mole, and you serve it over angel hair pasta, just loaded with sharp cheddar cheese that's been grated fine, and a couple handfuls of diced onions, and that's I like that.
I can feel the indigestion already. Yes, ma'am. What would you say is your biggest fear?
That I am not being truthful with myself. So that's a battle. That's a lifelong battle to make sure that what I say and what I do is truthfully in line with who I am, you know, the deepest part of me, my essence. And that's, I think, you know, societal pressures or money, or there's a lot of things that try to lure us away from that. And so my greatest fear is that would be not being truthful with myself about who I really am, or what I really want, or what I really stand for. That I would miss it. That would be a fear of mine.
Okay, so sort of a self-betrayal.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite book or movie or some piece of art, I guess, or I guess instead of movie, I should say film in this case. So,
well, from the standpoint of film, you know, I try not to watch a lot of content because I write screenplays, and I find if I watch a lot of content, it kind of locks me up. So I'm not a student of film in the way that a lot of people involved in film are. But for me, that's just the way it works best. I enjoy, I try not to watch other people necessarily live an interesting life. I try to dedicate myself to living a rich and deep and interesting life myself, and then ultimately the best stories come out of that. So I don't watch a lot of films, but if you put a gun to my head and made me answer that question, I would say It's a Wonderful Life. It's probably a film that I identify with, how the choices we make in life can affect the greater whole, the greater good. So I would say, yeah, probably It's a Wonderful Life would be my favorite film, though, I have several, but that would be the one that if you made me choose.
I have to say, as philosophical as you are, I'm kind of thinking I made a mistake scheduling this for the middle of the day. I should have a glass of whiskey with me right now, and
Sorry.
Funny. When is the last time you ate some dirt?
Oh, gosh. All the time, daily. You mean got bucked off, or?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Got bucked off? That's been a little while. I've made a lot better choices now that I'm, getting a little age on me. So I try not to put myself in situations where I hit the ground a lot. Haven't started a cult in a couple of years. And I would say my skill set changed enough that wasn't an issue, the last little while so much. I ate a lot of dirt early on. I rode Saddle Broncs in the PRCA for 3 years. I guess I was the only gal that did it then, and I guess that still holds true. So I got on about 250 head, and I ate a lot of dirt. So it's me and dirt have an intimate relationship.
Have you ever seen a UFO?
Not that I'm aware of. I've seen things that I don't understand what they are, but I don't know I'd classify them as a UFO. I think what I've seen is just an energy, something less definable.
And then the last question, would you tell us something unexpected about you? I have a feeling that's a pretty deep well, so we'll get into a lot of it later on. Try to pick just one thing.
Pick one thing. I love to dance. I think dancing and body awareness, being aware of my body and how I place it, that it blends so nicely with riding. So I love all forms of dance, and really enjoy expressing myself physically. So that would probably be something unexpected. I think I don't really separate my physicality, whether it's dance or I do jujitsu. So it's all really the same thing: body awareness and feeling, where my edges are, where I stop and the rest of the world begins. Although I can say as I've aged, that's gotten hazier. So maybe that's me just expanding, I hope,
Okay.
Now you really wish you had some whiskey, don't you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm tallying up your score here, and I believe you are going to land on 1,872 points, which I think is our high score of all time for this particular game. And that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment. Your choice.
I would take the awkward silence. I would definitely take the awkward silence.
I find those to be so incredibly satisfying. It's just, I don't know. I hope everybody appreciates those as much as I do.
Well, okay. I think I think silence is, I think it's so important. You know, if you're talking all the time, then, you know, we live life in contrast, right? One of the things I notice the most with people that ride, if you ride well, you understand how to ride with contrast. That there's moments when you're injecting a lot of energy into what you're doing, and other moments that you have to drain it out, and that the horse feels that contrast. That's really, in order to feel, you know, you have to put one thing against another and be able to differentiate between the two. And so if you're constantly in energy, then you'll get numb to it, and vice versa. If you're constantly silent, then you'll get numb to that. So I really think that contrast, being able to ride with contrast, is it's one of the key elements that I've taught for years, and I think it also goes for life. You know, that we have to sort of play one thing against the other in order for it to have some meaning. Yeah.
Absolutely. The road is defined by the ditches, right? Well, I'm realizing I accidentally skipped a question for you here, and this is one of those that I usually think I know the answer that's coming, but you are one of those people where I have no clue which way this is going to go. So, thoughts or feelings?
No feelings.
Okay.
I would definitely say feelings, you know, because I think thoughts tend to limit us or encapsulate us or close us in, and feelings are expansive and they open us up. So once again, there's contrast. I think for me personally, I try to allow myself to feel expansive, take in what, you know, the world, the horses, the birds, the air, take in what's coming to me. And then thoughts are still valuable, and that I try to distill it, but not always. You know, I used to always want to define things all the time, and then I realized that there's a time and a place for that, and certainly nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, there's a wordless place that we need to be able to live in, where we get out of that portion of our brain, out of our head, and feel without the need to define it. So I would say, if you made me pick, I would say feelings first.
Okay. Well, I like it. All makes sense. I would consider you a pretty thoughtful person from the conversations that we have had, but maybe your feelings are what give you the fruitful ground to be thoughtful over in the evenings, because you prefer to be actionable in the mornings, right?
Right. Now you're catching on.
Okay. Well, as I was talking with you, I thought the only logical way to go through this interview was to kind of do a linear progression, because your life really has been a journey of changing directions and formats and experiences. So I thought we would just kind of start at the beginning and work our way toward where you are now. So would you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your parents and all? Because unless I'm mistaken, you were not raised as an 8th generation Californio rancher, correct?
True. Yes, my parents are artists. They both went to Carnegie Tech at the time. Now it's Carnegie Mellon University, and they studied fine art. That's where they met, and had me and my brother. I have an older brother. He's an electrical engineer. They moved to California when I was 2, and they tried to make it in Northern California. Couldn't pull it off. My dad couldn't find work, and he was, to feed the family, he became a graphic artist, did graphic design, visual communications, lettering, packaging design. He ended up in Long Beach, California. I, from the age of approximately 6, just was horse crazy. No one could really understand why. I didn't come from, obviously, a ranching family. And so just horses, I just lived them and breathed them and dreamed about them, and wanted one, of course, but we had limited means. My folks told me, well, if you save up the money when you're 12 years old, if you're still interested, you buy the horse and we'll pay for the board. And I think they thought it was a passing fancy, but 6 years later, and a lot of piles of pennies on the bed, I had saved up, I don't know, I think it was like 375 or $400. And my 12th birthday came, and we still weren't in a position for me to have one. And so they said they still felt like they could fulfill their promise so long as it didn't go past my 13th birthday. So in February, the year I would have turned 13, they made good on their promise, and I went to a boarding stable in Southern California and paid $375 for a horse that had been left there in lieu of board. And Cricket was her name. And didn't have a saddle, didn't have anything. Just, she was actually $400, but they knocked $25 off so I could go buy a little bridle at the tack shop. And so I'd been taking riding lessons up until that point, just little riding lessons around. And I got Cricket and lived and breathed on her for 3 years. She died of a kind of a rare form of pleurisy I'd ever put down. And that really kind of started the odyssey of buying horses and riding different horses. And, I showed a little when I was younger, but I didn't have that competitive nature, I guess. I did get a lot out of it. It wasn't really financed to be able to go hard, but I did get a lot out of it. And then the family moved to Northern California. I went to college. I studied animal science, was pre-vet for a while. I judged livestock competitively all over the nation and did quite well with that. And then quit college, didn't get my degree. And my dad was a college professor. That was kind of a big deal. But moved to Wyoming, went to work on some of the big, I call them factories, but they were, the big lodge companies that had 190 head horses and put 125 people horseback every day and wrangled 150 head through the rocks every morning, the sun coming up. So did that for a while and worked around on some ranches here and there a little bit. And I had decided at that point that there's kind of a checklist of the things that really handy people had done in the course of their lifetime. And so it was, start colts, which I'd done for a living. I worked for a few horse trainers, cutting horse trainers, trained cow horse guys. And then I'd done that, and then, work around on the ranches a little bit, as I said, and kept checking those boxes. And then I thought, well, everybody I knew that was really handy that had kind of gone through the Western world, they rode some bucking horses. So I decided I wanted to ride saddle broncs. I got really sick in my 20s, and not to go into too much detail, but I was in the hospital a lot. And it was one of those kind of turning points where you get out and you go, what am I not doing because of some bullshit limitation that I've given on myself? And I thought I really would like to ride saddle broncs. They didn't have saddle bronc riding in the Women's Association, and I'm not super big into like gender specific associations. I kind of, I don't know why, I just feel like, we're all just people doing what we do. And so there were no rules about a woman getting a permit in the PRCA. So I got one, and I don't know, I went to like 30 or 40 rodeos. Most of the horses bucked me off. Out of those rodeos, I drew like 11 horses that had been to the NFR. So I could really draw good. I was pretty sick at the time, so I can't say that I was in optimal physical health. But, a lot of people asked me in my rodeo career, I traveled all over the West. And of course, a lot of the friends I made in rodeo are my still friends, still friends of mine today. Some good people there. And, I can't say that I was good at it, because even though saddle bronc riding isn't a strength event, there's still like a minimum amount required. I didn't really have the upper body strength. If I stayed in shape, meaning if my form was perfect, I could get by a few jumps, but if they set me up or got me out of shape, I didn't have the physical strength, the power to kind of muscle myself back in there. So I hit the ground a lot, got on about 250 head of horses, which in the bronc riding isn't a lot. Did it for 3 years, and I got some notoriety with that. And George Michael's NBC Sports Machine was at Shine Frontier days, because I entered the rookie bronc riding. I guess I was the only gal then or since. And the rookie bronc riding at Cheyenne is, horses kind of, they don't know them. They're unknown horses coming off the desert. And got on a couple head there. Anyway, George Michael's decided to do a story on me, and it aired nationally, and some people in Los Angeles saw it, and the movie industry called me, and I met them. They wanted to option my story, and we did, but nothing ever came of it. But what it did do is it got me to Los Angeles so I could check another box, and that was become a stunt person. So I did that for 6 years, worked on a lot of big features. Horses were my specialty. I also did cars and fights, but horses were kind of my thing. And then I sort of aged out of the stunt work and left, moved back up Northern California, bought a place, and met my husband, Dave. I decided to do the Californios ranch roping and stock horse contest because I just wanted to assemble a lot of really handy guys in an arena that didn't normally get to town. So I started doing that competition. I met my husband, Dave, through that. And just as a way to fund the event, I started doing ranch roping clinics. It was really just a way to put food on the table and try to kind of subsidize the event, because in the beginning it wasn't really making any money. It was costing a lot of money. Mortgaged my house to do it. I was all in. I'm just kind of that way. And it grew to be a big deal. We ended up at Reno, with 3,000 people at the gate, and best cowboys, certainly the best buckaroo cowboys that were alive at the time, competing in the arena. It was a judged event instead of a timed event. Designed all the classes, wrote all the rules, and it was very successful. We had people coming from all over the world to watch it, and still doing the clinics, did the branding DVD. And then life changes happen, and Dave decided he wanted to move on, and so he left a year and a half ago. And I've continued to do my horsemanship and my cow working clinics. I was always the lead off on those at our clinics, and then he was the lead off on our branding and roping and advanced roping. And so I continued to do my clinics, but I had a clinic student several years ago ask me if I'd be willing to do a clinic with some veterans that suffered from PTSD. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, whenever I come to your clinic, you specifically, my symptoms abate for a couple weeks. And I've been to other clinics and that doesn't happen. I think something about how you present things or the way you teach, I think it just affects me that way. And as soon as he said it, I just thought, you know what, I'll do it. And he said, well, what do you got to get paid? I said, nothing. Just if it helps him out, I'll do it. And so we couldn't quite get that off the ground, but it put the bug in my ear. And so this last year, I've been working pretty diligently on studying what I need to study to be able to understand the human brain, to understand trauma, understand PTSD, understand, physically what's going on emotionally. And so I'd just be starting phase 1 of kind of an exploration of this. I'll be offering some sessions. And that information will be on my website like in May, I guess. But I'm really excited about it because I think there's some really new innovative things I'd like to do that I think might have a big impact, be transformative for some folks. So how'd I do?
That sounds really interesting. Yes, ma'am. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but we'll definitely get more into that in a little bit.
Sure.
So I guess we'll go back to the sort of the start of the Californios and beginning. that competition. You were really building something from scratch. And so how flexible did you have to be, like maybe rewriting the rules and that sort of thing when you have one play out and you realize, oh, we've got a hole here or we need to adjust that? Was there very much of that sort of stuff going on?
There was some of that. I think, you're always in a little bit of flux. I had a vision of what I wanted to accomplish, and I was very thorough in how I wrote the rules, trying to think of ways that people would try to skirt around them, which is just human nature. It doesn't make you a bad guy. It's just human nature to try to work around something. So I did a lot of that. I spoke with some friends about it, their ideas, got a little bit of feedback and stuff. And then gradually the event evolved as we went along. But I stayed pretty true to my vision. I had a lot of pressure from sponsors, et cetera, that wanted me to add a class or change a rule because they felt it was in their best interest. And this is where I'm not so much a business person. I wouldn't do anything that I felt diluted the vision, the purity of the event, even if it cost the event money. And so I wasn't always accommodating. You have to know how to say no. What made the event unique was its purity, and I knew that. And so when you're tempted to water it down or you're tempted to make a change, you just remind yourself of what your vision is and try to hold true to that. So it did evolve in a positive way, but it never deviated from the purity of what it was supposed to be about. Yeah.
So I guess kind of what I was getting at there was maybe a little more in the details of the judging, because you're judging things that are pretty subjective. So like a
Yes.
team rope, we've got a couple criteria you have to meet, and then it's the fastest team wins. But that's not exactly the way this worked out. So would you describe for us some of the criteria and how you decided to weigh this thing over that thing, where it wasn't quite as black and white as like fastest time wins?
Yeah. Well, I knew that it would be a real challenge for judges because, how do you quantify what's going on in the arena when there's that much in front of you? And so I just made a list of criteria and put it on a scorecard, and then I assigned a point value plus or minus 3 to 5 points either direction for each of those criteria. So, horsemanship, stock handling, size of the loop, distance thrown, timing of the shot, handling of the slack, all of the criteria that you saw before you was assigned a point value. And then that scorecard, judges didn't know. They just would assign their point value. They didn't know how the class was ultimately going to be placed. They just handed their scorecards to a group of secretaries that I had situated with a lot of calculators. And then those scorecards were all added up and points tallied and put into a computer system we put together that placed the class based on that for us. So that's how I tackled that part of it. I kind of likened it to like figure skating, where different things earned you different points. Different shots were, difficulty, the difficulty of the shot, but also the appropriateness of it. So I didn't want it to be a trick roping contest. I wanted it to be about real life shots that were actually thrown on fresh cattle. So if someone took a calf out and they'd thrown a time or two and missed, it's time to get the calf to the ground, and the calf's tired. So that became a priority. And so if I saw someone still trying to throw a fancy shot at that point, then they may not, they might even be penalized for making that choice, because in the moment that wasn't the right choice to make. First time out, maybe, but second or third time out of the bunch, they needed to make a different decision, because the priority was to get the work done and make sure that, the cattle were handled properly. So I didn't, folks weren't rewarded for standing around choking stuff, or, it was, it's not what you do on a ranch. And so we really tried to focus on real life working situations.
Well, I really do appreciate that. I'm not a great roper, but I have worked with like some young kids starting out roping, and we've now got ranch roping in the 4-H in the state now, and all that. It's one of the first things that I tell all those kids. Most of them come from a rodeo background, and like if you actually go to work on a ranch and every time the owner drives by in a truck, you're chasing something out across his pasture wide open, you got about 1 week and you're looking for another job. That is not a sign of actual good cowboy.
Sure.
And I also want to say that I love the fact that on my podcast, you have openly said that you got the ideas for judging this thing in figure skating. I have a feeling that's going to rub all the right people the wrong way. So I love that you said that.
Well, it's I think the important thing here is that ranching and livestock handling is a living, dynamic thing. And that means that you have to stay open and you have to read the situation. I asked my husband, Dave, at the time, I said, what do you consider of all the different talents? What do you consider the most important thing to be a good cowboy? And I thought he might say rope and heavy stock. I thought he might say riding green horses and getting the job done. I didn't know what he was going to say. And right away, he said situation awareness and the ability to adjust. And that's what made a good cowboy. And so because things are changing second by second, and something that might have been a great idea a minute and a half ago would be the worst idea you could come up with in your life. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. You have to apply that, even though we had rigid rules, et cetera, in the event. Everything was all written to make sure that we could adapt and adjust to the situation as the input changed. As the input changes, new information comes in, then you have to adapt and adjust. So, yeah, that was really kind of the cornerstone of the event.
I love how you say that. It really is funny how such subtle things can turn in our business a sure thing into a no way. Something as simple as an animal taking 2 more steps or turning their nose from right to left, and all of a sudden the situation is completely different. I do find it like clinics and things, especially colt start clinics, where things can be a little dangerous and all. That colt could tell me something and change 3 times before I can verbalize the first thing.
Yes.
There's just so much information that comes at you so fast from them with their body language that it really is everything's changing all the time. It's such a dynamic situation. You can just never be flat-footed out there, or you're in danger. So.
Yeah, and I could speak to that in that I think really what we're teaching in colt starting or ranch roping, or really horsemanship in general, is we're teaching that to remain open, and in my opinion, and to continue to feel the situation as it changes. And it's a difficult thing to teach, just like you said. It's tough to quantify. Well, what's the right thing to do? We've all had those questions. What do I do when my horse does this? Well, it depends. There's some likely answers, and your odds are that this would be the right answer, but there's no guarantee. What's the footing? Where are you? Are you in the side of a mountain? Are you in an arena? I mean, the answers to those questions change with all that input. So to stay open, to the input that's coming in from the horse, I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine not too long ago because they were probably in their 40s and they hadn't ridden at all and they wanted to learn to ride. Great. Okay. They said, what do you think how long is it going to take me to be able to ride well? And I said, well, define ride well, because that's kind of that's hard to define, riding well. At what level? What do you mean? And I explained to them, I said, I've been riding since I was 6. And the value of being a child and learning to ride when you're a child, of course, is you don't have the fear built into you from, that adults do. But also you try things. When you're a kid, you try things. You climb up on top of the fence, the horses are loose in a pen beside you, they're eating their hay off the ground, and you look at that beautiful back, in front of you, and you think, I think I can jump on that. I think I can jump off the fence and jump on there. And you're a kid and you try it. And maybe it works out and maybe it doesn't. Maybe one day you do it, it's 104 degrees, the horse has been rode every day for 2 weeks and he's quiet, you've been handling him, he knows you. And you can jump right across there and he doesn't even wiggle. 3 days later, it's 42 degrees outside, there's a breeze blowing, there's some sleet, horse hasn't been rode, he's been on hot feed, same horse, same kid. It's not going to work out quite as good when you try to jump on his back on that day. Well, all the sensitivity, that you learned, what can I get away with when? Same kid, same horse. But all the input is different. The backstory is different. And how am I going to process all of that? Because that's going to determine what decisions I make when I ride him today. So when you miss that chapter, when you come to riding a little bit older in life, it's hard to make that up. It's really hard to make up that kind of bulletproof period of your life when you make those silly mistakes and they stand you on your head and you get up and you brush yourself off and you're fine. It's hard to do that when you're 40 or 50. And not to say that you can't. I mean, there's value, obviously, in learning to ride and doing what you can do. You have to set yourself up for success a little bit differently in the horse selection that you make, the money you spend on the horse you buy, the kind of horse you buy. You can hedge your bet a little bit. But I just thought it was an interesting discussion,
Mm-hmm. For sure. Context always matters, and it always depends. There's just no getting around all of that.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit, like I'm still thinking about the judging of this competition, because one of I've kind of been on, I've been talking a lot lately about the horseman type of a person. And those people are often difficult to recognize unless you are already at a certain level. And one of the reasons they're difficult to recognize, and I think this is where it ties in with the stockmanship and the roping, nothing that they do looks like a big deal. It's all smooth and effortless and not eye-catching. And they're doing a whole lot of stuff that catches your eye. Odds are some bad decisions happened right before whatever caught your eye. so
Sure.
It could be, it might be more exciting to watch the wide open running across the arena, but the real best hand might be the one that roped his stock when the stock was standing still and the horse was standing still, and they just pulled them right off over here and did what they needed to do, and they were done in 45 seconds, and that was that. And it really didn't ever look like much of anything, but if you really are thinking of stress and efficiency and stockmanship, that was really the best thing. So how were y'all accounting for that? And I guess I'm going to say here as an aside too, just so I don't forget, I love that this is the sort of competition where the 20-year-olds don't have an advantage. Like in rodeo, the youth, that means something, the quicker reflexes and all of that. But in a stockmanship competition, the 47-year-old has a big advantage on the 22-year-old.
Yeah.
Did y'all see that play out, and how did you manage the quiet, subjective nature of the true masters that don't necessarily stand out?
Well, I think the scoring system I had allowed for that. And I've had people ask me about my scoring system, and I always tell them, boy, you really kind of have to design your own, because everybody comes at it a little bit differently, and so it has to be a reflection of your values and the stock that you have available and the contestants that you have available, in order to design a scoring system that works for your particular roping. So two things I wanted to mention. If you're going to be a cowboy, you're going to be a good hand. There is a certain amount of physicality that is required. And so I always bring this up because it's not just your level of fitness, but also your body awareness, being aware of your body and how it moves and subtle changes that you make in it, etc. So I don't want to take anything away from that, because I've known a lot of folks that had a lot of potential, but because they didn't work on their physicality, they just weren't fit enough to be able to hold their body in such a way that they could be supportive of the maneuver they were asking the horse to do. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so it would hold them back. And I would say it's your physicality in this moment that's holding you back. You can change that. And yet, they didn't maybe want to, which is okay. It's just their life choice. But there is a level of physicality, and that'll never go away. Riding horses is a physical thing. But yet, obviously, we all know that, your level of experience is a huge factor in your success. I will say that what I tried to recognize and what I tried to teach folks was that what makes a horse broke is their ability to handle transitions, be they subtle, be they small, be they big. It's all about transitions, one thing to the next. A horse can have a beautiful trot, but if his transitions from one gait to another, for example, from one frame to another, if those are rocky or sketchy or awkward, then he's not broke. So the same is true for the human mind. So we can't expect our horse to make all these transitions without the human being equally willing to make those transitions, be they a physical transition or an emotional transition. So an emotional transition might be that, the horse perhaps he's being defiant, perhaps he's just unsure, being able to recognize the difference between those two things. The human becoming frustrated, the human running out of information. We always say that if you're riding a horse and you get mad, it's because you ran out of information. As long as you've got tools in your toolbox, as long as you've got different ideas about how to solve things, you won't get mad. You won't let your ego get in the way, and you won't get mad. It's when you completely run out of information that your ego boils up and you feel like you've been insulted and how dare you do this to me, and then you get mad. Mm-hmm. So transitions emotionally for the human, the ability to counter. Horse gets upset, we get calmer, for lack of a better way of saying it. Emotional transitions and physical transitions. So if I watch someone ride well, they have the ability to make those transitions. But here's the important part. They've shortened the amount of time between those transitions so infinitely small that it appears as though it's all happening at the same time. It appears as though they're focusing on the horse and the cow and their arm and their hand and their rope, their geographical position in the arena. They're focusing on, they're doing it all at the same time, but they're not. They're really not. What they're doing is what started out as, let's say the increment of time was, okay, I've got my horse in the right position. He's just where he needs to be. Oh, now I have to get my rope going. And now I got to get the tip where I need to get the tip. Oh, now I have to change my body. You see, everything I just described in that moment was long. There's like a big gap between each transition. So as you learn to ride well or rope well, you start shortening that. So now it's horse, cow, rope, horse, cow, rope, horse, cow, rope, horse, cow, rope, horse, cow, rope. And it just basically, you shorten the transition of attention between all the things. What am I doing with my spine, my body, my sit bones? How am I placing my body weight? How am I being supportive? What's the horse's frame? What's he doing with his pole? Is he relaxed and quiet? Is he tense? Is he framed the way that I want him to be framed? Am I swinging where the cattle are, or instead of where they're going to be? Or, I'm going to put the cow into my loop, or I'm going to put my loop on the cow. What am I doing here? So when you learn to shorten your attention span on all of these little things, you just shorten it down so tiny that it's like film running through a movie camera. It appears seamless. You don't see the individual frames, but they're still there. So I tell folks that. Not that we're doing it all at the same time. We've just learned we've learned our physical and emotional transitions. We've learned how to shorten that increment down to where you almost can't see me transition between the things. It's so small. So it's an interesting way of looking at it anyway.
Okay. Well, Miss Gwynn, we have gotten to the point where I need to pay some bills, and we need to bring our sponsor in for this episode, and I found one for you. We have conversed via email probably 10 years ago. I had emailed you about a particular shot that I had seen on y'all's DVDs that I was having trouble with, and so this is in honor of that.
I shudder to think.
Our sponsor for this episode is the Kulo Coolers. Have you been polishing leather with denim for years? Are you more familiar with chafing than your kitchen? Are long drives and a sleeping bum a regular occurrence for you? Kulo Coolers is here to help. Our tea tree oil infused gel saddle pads incorporate our patented permafrost nanotechnology to help you cool in those areas that are trying to get a little swampy. Did you know that air is one of the best insulators in the world? Our patented process uses the heat you create to drive the cooling. The warmer your bum gets, the more the Kulo Cooler will help you to chill. We've got models made to fit your saddle like a glove, and others that will cover your truck seat and remove the heat. No more chafing, no more moisture and heat building up and letting you down. We'll have you feeling drier than Carol Baskin at a Tiger King concert, drier than Hillary Clinton's eyes at Jeffrey Epstein's funeral, drier than an Amish liquor cabinet. We'll have you as cool and dry as Fonzie when he jumped over that shark. You'll be as cool and dry as Jason Bateman in every movie he's ever been in. Yes, you'll be that kind of cool and dry. Try Kulo Coolers today.
Okay. Have to get me a few of those, right? Funny.
My favorite part of all these is writing the ads.
I bet. I believe it.
Okay. So I think we've covered a bunch of the California competition stuff. So how does it morph from there? You were kind of already doing some clinics, and then we decided to make the films, or how did that all happen?
The California was still going on, and we were doing the clinics, and we started the clinics like a year into the show, just as I said, to subsidize the Californios because we had no money. And then when I did branding, I did a little highlights DVD of the Californios, which was, 40 minutes or something long. It was just a video montage, no instruction, no talking, set to music. I did that first with some footage I had of the Californios. And then, but I told Dave, I said, I really feel like I'd like to do a DVD on branding. I had experience in film, of course, by then, and I worked in the industry and was pretty confident, that I wanted to do it. And so we started, let's see, I started the Californios in 2000. I met Dave at the first Californios. Then the branding video came out in 2008. I think I started filming it in 2005, and it came out in 2008. And it was really meant to be a supplement to our clinics. You know, kind of like a little additional tutorial so people could reference it after they'd been to a clinic. And then I can't remember when I did, but quite a few years later, Equus Film Festival was going on in New York City. And I was within the deadline on when something had been produced to be able to enter the branding DVD. So I entered it in their instructional category. And I didn't think any more of it. I entered it, and then, you know, life took off and I was busy. And it turns out it won, which is great. Won the Equus Film Festival in its category, and it screened in Manhattan, which I thought was funny. But everybody liked it. And so I thought, you know, yeah, it is a valuable piece. I really do like the film. Very proud of it. Very glad I did it. And certainly a time capsule. And it is beautifully photographed, I will say. And, you know, it'll take you to places that you wouldn't get otherwise. So that's kind of the timeline of how that happened.
And I really do have to give you some kudos on this. And I'm not nearly as well educated or versed on videoing, but I have got my degree from the School of Hard Knocks in it. And I can tell everybody out there that having an idea of what you want to show and then trying to get natural light and live animals to cooperate in showing what you're trying to show is a very, very, very difficult endeavor. And I think you pulled it off wonderfully. I know that we shoot way, way more video that gets deleted than ever gets released, just because the angle wasn't right to see the hand that we were trying to. It never played. The horse tosses its head and gets in the way of what you know. There's just always something that messes it up. And I can remember very distinctly. This is one of the things that probably struck me the most and made me start paying a little more attention to the filming elements of it, the technical aspects. But like in those interviews, the way you had the shadow over the eyes, the hat brim just perfectly cutting off on the nose, and it was consistent throughout. I was like, yeah, that's not on accident. That was done. That was carefully, orchestrated to work out that way, and it looks super cool. And I know that was difficult to pull off. So I really recognize you had a lot going on there. It wasn't just the informational content of it, but there were multiple layers of excellence that you were demonstrating. So I'm glad you got your kudos from the people in Manhattan there on that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. You know what, the funny part of this is that as a hobby or a sideline, or I don't know, I write screenplays, okay? And through my contacts in Los Angeles, I've been working at it about 20 years, self-educated on that. And so finally I wrote one that I really felt was top tier and sent it to some industry professionals. They agreed, and it was well received, and it got it's contemporary Western drama, and I am proud of it. It turned out great, and I'm really happy with it. And it's almost like I didn't write it. You know, I mean, I just feel removed from it in that way. It just sort of, I'm not going to say it wrote itself, because writing a screenplay of any depth or quality is very difficult. But it did have its own life, and I believe in the bedrock of my soul that it will be a beautiful film one day. But I was in a meeting. It had gone out. There's an older character in it. It had gone out to Michael Caine's agent, and she thought it was great, sent it on to him. He passed on the part. But through the course of my meetings down there, one of the things I said is I really feel I'm the right person to direct the film, because it's like probably a $2 million indie. And I wrote it with it in mind that I might direct it, at which point I knew funding would be limited. So I had to write it in such a way that it was, a manageable budget. And they said, well, what makes you think you could direct a film? And, I keep in mind, I spent 6 years on a movie set and worked under, some great directors, right? McTiernan. And I mean, it's not that I haven't had my moments there. So I said, well, the bigger question is what makes you think I couldn't? I mean, given I can't imagine what it would be like to have the support of a director of photography and camera operator. I can't imagine, and gaffers, lighting, sound. That was all taken care of, because when I was filming branding, that was all my responsibility. And I'm sitting there huddled behind a sagebrush, flipping through, the wind blowing the pages of the manual that I'm trying to read to try to figure out how I'm going to do whatever I needed to do technically with a piece of equipment that I wasn't familiar with. I said, I can't imagine what it would be like to film something where I actually could plan, what I was doing, have a shot list for the day. I mean, so I think that'll come to fruition. I can't justify the comment that I just made with anything concrete, but I'm hopeful, because I think it's a beautiful story, and I think folks, particularly horse people, but just population in general, I think get a lot out of it.
Well, I'll just tell this because I just lived it, but I've started an online bit course, which we're almost all the way done with the inaugural group right now. And there's a particular shot that I have had in my head for several years now. And it was basically on proving some of the fundamentals of cheek balance, because a lot of the information we have out there about how these things balance and what this does and all this, I believe to be wrong. So I wanted to build a bunch of models and then put them on a balance. And then we draw the shank back the same exact degree on each one, and we let it fly, and we measure in time how long it takes for it to return to neutral, how long it continues to swing for, and so forth. And so I actually did that for this online course. And I was building the cheeks out of PVC pipe. So they were modular, and I could, tear this down or just add this, and you could see very plainly all we had done was that. And in my head, that was going to cost like $100 and probably take me an afternoon. In reality, it was 2 weeks and $600.
Yeah, I believe you.
And it seems, I still can't hardly believe that it took me that long to get it, but you just don't know what you don't know until you get in the middle of it. And then this doesn't look the way I thought it would. Now I have to figure out how to fix that so that it comes across correctly. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Then I'll wind up being like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 minutes worth of video when it's all said and done. That took me 2 weeks to come up with, but I am proud of it. I think we showed what I ultimately wanted to show, but it was a much bigger pain in the neck than I ever would have believed, or that I think anybody will believe when it was all said and done. So
interesting. Yeah, I think I had a bit making contest at the Californios, and it was for traditional bits. Then makers from all over would enter and be judged. It was interesting to me that I have a bit of my own. It's like got an Ortega cheek, it's a spade, and maker unknown. But I took it to a fella that's kind of, historian on that kind of thing. He looked at it and he said, oh yeah, this is before cars came along, when this was built. And I said, what makes you say that? And he said, the cheek, he said, there was a period of time in there where the really good bit makers they'd hand forge the cheek, and they would make the leading edge of the cheek thicker than the trailing edge of the cheek. So if you looked at a spade, like let's say Santa Barbara, okay, you looked at the leading edge, it was one thickness. By the time you tapered that cheek back to the back of it, it was half. And they were hand forging and manipulating the thickness of the cheek. And he said, then when cars came along, a lot of guys started cutting their bits out of car frames,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that hand forging went away, and so you started getting these cheeks that were, equal thickness front to back, and it changed the balance of the bit. It changed how the horse carried it and all this stuff. And so after that conversation, for years, I'd always look at bits differently, and I say, are they really understanding all the things you have to work with, when you build a bit? It's not just shape of the cheek, it's thickness front to back of the cheek. But that was a fascinating detail that a lot of folks didn't notice. But I did notice a consistency with that, with horses that particularly liked a bit. It tended to be something of that nature, where there was a subtlety built into it like that other bits didn't have. I thought you'd find that interesting.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And that kind of brings us, not the way I was planning on getting here, but I did thought I would bring this up because I'm sure this is something that you have encountered, and I'm just curious how you have dealt with it, or if you have dealt with it. But the buckaroo world is very much a club sort of a thing, and not just anyone is allowed admittance. And I'm imagining that you came up against that outer layer of it, and so what are your thoughts on that? Did you have some struggles gaining admittance, or do you feel like you have full admittance at this point, or what?
That's a great question, and a lot of people don't really talk about it. I can say that the buckaroo community that I came in contact with because of my husband, Dave, I met a lot of phenomenal people. They were very friendly, and inclusive to a point. It is kind of a clanny, cliquey group, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, we would all experience that, say, for example, if you grew up in a town together and you went to grade school together, or boarding school, whatever it was, there's a bond there in those remote places, small group of people that all kind of had that common denominator growing up, that, you're never really going to fully transcend as an outsider coming in. I will say, for me personally, I tend to be a bit of an observer. I think my real focus and value in the world is to sort of not belong anywhere, and to kind of stand back, and I'm kind of a big picture person. I want to sort of take things in as an observer objectively. And so, having said that, I can't say that my goal was really to be included, intimately. So I think there's a lot of families, in the ranch environment where they're 3, 4, 5th generation. They're all intermarried, and I call it ranch lineage, right? They'll talk about ranch lineage the same way they talk about horse pedigrees. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. I get it. But I feel, for me personally, my real value was to kind of be a little bit more of a fly on the wall. I mean, I participated, I've been to a lot of brandings and worked with Dave in a lot of different places. So I had a lot of exposure. Do I really feel like I fit in? Depended on the day, I guess, but I don't criticize the folks for being a little bit exclusionary that way. They're very dedicated to their life, and that's what they know, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it can be, if you're someone trying to kind of break into that world, you have to be forgiving of that, because we all have a little bit of that in us. We bond with people we've been around for a long time. You kind of know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Somebody new comes along, and there's a level of anxiety that comes with that, or suspicion. So those aren't bad things. That's just human nature. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Somewhat. I have a follow-up question for you. So, one of the,
Yeah.
I would say, characteristics of that group to me is that very little is recorded, written down, spelled out. Here are the rules. It's all kind of, well, you're just supposed to know it. And it's, to me, it's part of the preservation of, air quotes, the mystery. And so I'm wondering if, because you did catalog some of it, you filmed it, you explained it, you said this is what we're trying to do and how we do it. Did you get any pushback for that? That you're not supposed to show that to the world, or no?
No, I'll tell you what. So the real good buckaroos are the real handy folks. They're always open-minded. They're aware of the etiquette, but they're not hung up on it. Just like anyone that's really secure in what they know and what they do, they always tend to be more open and more forgiving. It's the folks that I say are in the middle, the kind of the fringe. You know, they don't quite have the skills that the super handy do, and because of that, they're a little insecure, a little threatened, and they'll use what knowledge they do have to try to exclude folks from knowing what they're doing. But I would say, all in all, like in those ranches and stuff, you have to really, the context of it is, especially the big places, there's a lot of work to do and they're busy doing it. They don't give a lot of thought to communicating the rules. Number one, there's a reason they live 60 miles of gravel from town. Okay, maybe they aren't good communicators. Maybe they're not super social people. Maybe they don't use words a lot. Maybe they're not telling you because they don't know how to explain it. There's things growing up on a ranch that they learned. They don't even know they know it. They just know that that's what you do. And so I don't think really that they're trying to exclude you or be secretive or anything like that. I think they're just busy with their job, and they figure, well, if you stick around long enough, you'll figure it out, either by example or by making the mistake and have somebody dying on you. But I don't think it's a premeditated thing with the folks that are really out there doing it. There is a group of folks that, like I said, they're kind of on the fringe. They do just enough of it to be dangerous, and they get really hung up on tradition, and they get really hung up on the outfits and what to wear and all that stuff. And that's okay. You know, it's just a phase they got to go through. Ultimately, once they get all the way through that, you know, it becomes less important again. In the end, it's all about staying open and aware, situation awareness, the ability to adjust, always working at getting better, paying attention, you know, noticing things, learning about livestock, learning about cattle, you know, learning about horses and horsemanship and equipment, you know, and the way that it impacts your job. And if you just focus on that, you'll be okay.
I'll give Bruce Sandifer a little bit of a plug here. I did an interview with him a couple of years ago, and one of the things I really appreciated about him, he puts his Makati on his hackamore backwards, where the tassel winds up pointing towards the horse's tail rather than out the front. And that is not the traditional way to do it, but it's a much more sensible way, because you don't have horsehair tickling horse whiskers all day long that way. And
sure,
I really appreciate about him that he's willing to break with tradition to do something that makes more sense to do for the benefit of the horse. I think that's a much better way to go about it. And the people that have that outlook, I'm a lot happier to talk with than those that are, you know, they'll die on this hill of tradition, even if it's really not a good idea. And we've kind of proven that. So,
yeah, just like in all things, you know, that's just a sign of insecurity. You know, somebody that, I mean, you ultimately, ranching is a real life experience, and you know, you have to be cognizant of the fact that there's a job that needs to get done, and how are we best going to serve that? still, maintain our goals. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, anytime someone starts getting real nitpicky about that stuff, I mean, I'm not a traditionalist when it comes to equipment. I have a lot of very traditional equipment. It's beautiful. I think it adorns the horse. It honors the horse in a beautiful way. But at the same time, I've got correction bits. My tack room's full of a lot of different stuff. It's certainly not all traditional. And ultimately, for me, it's, what does this horse like, and how does he work in it, and what is his body posture, and how does it feel to him, and what is his attitude? And, that's way more important to me. And I'll use whatever piece of equipment is going to get me a positive result, so long as it's, humane and ethically sound. Then to me, I don't stick with tradition. That surprises a lot of people. You ask me, tell you something that surprised you or that people wouldn't know about me. And that's probably it, is that, yeah, it doesn't, the equipment really, I don't care what discipline it comes from. To me, it's all about, the horse's demeanor and how he handles himself and how much he likes it. And yeah. If he'll do everything in a halter, that's fine.
Yes, ma'am. At the end of the day, it's just a tool, and it's up to who's controlling the tool to determine the outcome of what that tool does, right?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure if the vaqueros of old, when they were catching stuff out here in, the San Joaquin Valley, if correction bits were available at that time, they'd have been all over it. So, I don't. The Californios taught me that that all things have their time. And you have to be respectful of that. The earth keeps turning and things change and evolve. We get more information about neurology and muscles and teeth. And and all that information is something that you take in, and you can constantly make new decisions about, what the best way forward is. Not to say that you don't weigh heavily the past knowledge that you have. This worked great. I'm not going to get rid of something that works great just because something new came along. But at the same time, I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to hold it up against, what I have been doing, and experiment with it and take in from it what I need to take in. They said, I never was in, who was it? I'm trying to think of a name right now. And of course, I'm drawing a blank. I fell in Tuscarora. Can't think of it. That's Murphy's Law. Anyway, his tack room was full of every gimmick you could possibly imagine. Didn't use most of them, but he tried everything. And he was someone that came from a very traditional background, and he was a traditional felt, Hackmore 2-rein, straight up in the bridle, showed the Elko County Fair. But he was open-minded enough to try everything, and he might try it for a little while, learn what he needed to learn from that piece of equipment, what it did or what it didn't do, compare it to what he was using, and then he might hang it on the wall for an eternity, never use it again. But I always respected him for that open-mindedness, that I think that's what we all should be doing, really. Like, I don't get hung up on tradition. I think there's aspects of it that are beautiful and worth preserving, but it doesn't mean that you don't look at other alternatives on that journey. It's pretty important.
For sure. Yes, ma'am. Well said. Let me think of how I'm going to wind up editing this out, but I had a question. Okay. So this is kind of the last California direct question that I'll ask you here, but given that it's a world of horsemanship and stockmanship, what balance would you say most of those people have? Is it 50-50 horse and livestock, cows predominantly, or are most of them more a cowman who uses a horse as the method of getting from point A to point B,
Mhm.
or most of them horsemen that use the cow as the excuse to have the horse? How do you think that tends to play out these days?
Well, I'm only going to speak to the period of time I was involved with it, because I'm not sure what's going on right now out there. I haven't been involved with it now for a couple of years. So it's changed just obviously. I mean, let me tell you this. When I started the Californios in 2000, 80% of the guys in the arena worked full-time, buckarooed full-time on one of the big outfits on a big crew. And the other 20% were guys that had either retired or, had they were horseshoers or whatever, but they had buckarooed in their lifetime and moved on to something else. Okay. By the end of the show in 2012, that dynamic had flipped. Only 20% of the guys in the arena were working full-time on a big crew and a big outfit. The beginning of the show in 2000, I don't know how many of the big outfits were running cookhouses. By 2012, there was one left at the time that was involved. So ranching had changed so dramatically in that time period. That was another reason I stopped having the show, because it was becoming more and more difficult to find folks that were still practicing that particular discipline on a big outfit, and had the volume of cattle and horses that they had when I started it. So I would say, so you can see how things changed just in the 13 years that I had the show. But I would say it's difficult to quantify. I mean, some of the guys were very good horsemen, and their cattle handling was good. It wasn't their full focus. There were other guys, their horsemanship left a lot to be desired, but they had an amazing read on a cow and really understood cattle and cow psychology, where they'd be at what time of day, and sick cattle, and just understanding how to handle all those situations. Just really, really amazing cowmen. Maybe their horsemanship wasn't great, and vice versa. And then of course the guys that were both were the cream of the crop, that had both. So I can't really say that it leaned one way or the other. It was really on an individual basis. Everybody had their strengths. The guys that were the best had both. Very difficult to find a good cowboy and a cowman. It's
fewer of them out there than people tend to think. Well, I kind of believe that's part of the allure of the bridle horse and all. We have such a pedestal, but there's a whole bunch of them that did not meet the level that we would think. Just like I know some cowboys that have been riding for decades that don't know their leads yet.
Absolutely.
They can get it done, but you just wonder, like, how have you spent that much time around a horse and don't know more about it than this?
Absolutely. So, yeah. And I noticed that too. When I first showed up on the scene, I was like, wow. But there's different kinds of horsemanship. I mean, when I watch a guy that doesn't know his leads, but he's able to get on a horse with 4 rides on him and brand calves half the day, and that horse had a positive experience, and his ears were up and he was happy about what he got done at the end of the day, and he might have been bucking every 3rd calf, but this person had the expertise to be able to handle his rope and the cattle and the situation and get through that. That's horsemanship. It may not be classical horsemanship. He may not know what lead he's on, but you can't discredit the knowledge and experience that person has gained about how to get around a colt at a branding successfully. And I'm not talking about slopping through it. I'm talking about, at the end of the day, that horse is better for it. That is a kind of horsemanship. It's not what we think of when we think of classical horsemanship, arena work, or understanding frame and understanding, transitions in the way that we do. But I don't want it, you can't discredit that. That's valuable. Because if you saw the same guy in an arena, he he'd be lost. I mean, he could get from point A to point B, but he didn't have an understanding of that. That's just the nature of how his life, the information that came to him. He needed a job. He went to work on a ranch. These were the horses that were available. If you want a buckaroo, if you want a cowboy, guess what? That horse has 4 rides on him. We're branding tomorrow, and your other horses are crippled, or you know what I mean? Like this. Yeah, there's a practical element.
Yes, ma'am. Well, so I'm going to segue with this. I don't think I've brought this up on the podcast yet, but in February, I was privileged to be a part of a mental health summit for horsemen called Buck the Trend. And they took a dozen of us to Colorado, and we did a pretty intensive weekend with some counselors. And it wasn't necessarily therapy for us, but more training us to kind of help other people and recognize some signs. A lot of people don't know it, but the suicide rate in the ranching and farming and agriculture in general is extremely high right now. Believe it or not, if you don't know it, veterinarians have the highest suicide rate of any profession right now.
Wow.
So this was kind of a summit that was focused on that. It was put on by Miss Maddie Butcher, who runs the Best Horse Practices Summit and podcast. And the reason I bring that up was I'll tell a little bit of my role in that.
Yeah.
We all got in a room, and you're being asked to talk about some pretty intimate things and feelings and the sort of things you don't normally share, maybe even with people that are pretty close to you. And here you are with a bunch of strangers. And to add more difficulty to it, you've got a room full of pretty introverted people who wouldn't normally be talking anyway, even if it was.
Yes.
So I was sort of the first cow through the fence. I was the volunteer that spoke up for the most part, and they wound up thinking I was an extrovert by the time it was all said and done. And I was like, no, not at all. It was just the role that I needed to play in order. Otherwise, we were going to sit here in a stalemate all weekend and nobody was going to speak. So I just spoke. But so I wonder about that with the filming that you've done and all that, and now your next project with the PTSD, you tend to be in communities that I would expect would be mostly introverted type people, as you were saying, that they live 60 miles from town for a reason. And so have you had many challenges with that aspect of trying to get them to open up or talk about this when they're just, if any of y'all have never done it, trying to have a conversation with a camera is extremely uncomfortable, especially the more introverted you are. So what sort of challenges have you had with regard to the introverted nature of the community you've been documenting?
Well, interesting. Well, the beauty of my own personal history is that horses are really a wordless world, and that applies to humans as well. So I'm comfortable sitting in silence or reading body language. They don't necessarily need to talk about, let's say, a traumatic experience. And it's been proven now that talk therapy isn't always the best therapy when it comes to PTSD. Sometimes it is, sometimes it can be incorporated, just depends how. But really, it's really more about feeling what you're feeling in the moment and trying to work with the deregulation that you feel when something triggers you. And so you don't necessarily need to talk your way through that. Movement is of great value when you're trying to move through those feelings or experiences. And so that's where horses come into play. And I think often of the way, frequently, if I'm on a horse and we get stuck, we have a little problem, gets a little hump in his back, whatever, your go-to thing is to just reestablish some forward movement and get his feet moving, just get his feet moving. And so when I think about that and I translate it to people, you know, a lot of folks that have PTSD, and I'm making a general comment now because, you know, everybody's different, right? But there are trends, and you know, physiologically, what happens is, you know, a traumatic event will happen, and let's just use, just for simplicity's sake, an event that like a one-time deal, okay? A traumatic event happens, car accident or combat, whatever it may be. And normally that goes into our brain in, you know, one portion of our brain that takes that in. And then it's transferred from that filing cabinet, that portion of our brain, into another portion of our brain that takes that traumatic event and it kind of organizes it into a story. And the story is very clear in that this is what happened then. It's not happening right now. It's what happened then. Well, with PTSD, what frequently happens, the way it's been explained to me, and for those of you that are experts in the field listening to that, I understand that this is my bastardized version of it, but it's a processing issue where it doesn't get transferred from the portion of the brain that experienced it into this other portion of the brain that organizes into a past experience, okay? And so when a person is triggered again, they feel it again as if it's happening right now. And so understanding that about how PTSD works, sometimes talking about an experience, a traumatic experience over and over again doesn't necessarily help. Talk therapy isn't always the right choice for PTSD. It doesn't always move the person into, doesn't necessarily move that out of there and put it in the part of the brain that says, yes, it was bad and it happened, but it happened back then and it's not happening now. So whether or not a person's introverted or extroverted, for me personally, I don't have a preference. If they're introverted, I'm an introverted person. I've taught myself to become more extroverted when I need to. I'm very comfortable speaking. As an introvert, I've trained myself to be able to speak and relate to folks. It just takes a lot of energy. So I'm very focused. I'm listening to you very sincerely. I'm taking in everything about what you say and how you say it and how it might make you feel to say it. So that takes a lot of energy. And so I would say when I'm dealing with introverted people, it probably takes a little more energy than the extrovert, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. I would say it's even. I'm equally comfortable, you know, both ways. Yeah.
Okay. So with this new endeavor that you've got that'll be starting up, would you kind of give us a little bit of the lay of the land, what that looks like for the time being, and what you're hoping to get out of it? Where, like, are you going to be traveling and doing this, or is this all at your home place, or what's kind of the cliff notes of it, I guess?
Well, a year ago, you know, or a little over a year ago when I started researching it, I looked at a lot of the equine assisted PTSD or trauma therapies that are currently in use. Kind of studied what they were doing, spoke with the head of the psych department at Columbia University for quite a while. They sent me to another facility and spoke with them for quite a while. They're pretty far down the road of doing this. In both situations, what I found was the conversation started out with me asking the questions, and it ended up with them asking me questions about, what do you think of this, and what should we try here, and you know. And I thought, what I really felt was that the programs that exist are noble in their cause, and I think they're doing a good job of with what they're doing, but I don't feel that the exercises and the programs that they've designed, I feel like they just kind of barely scratch the surface of what a horse can really do for you. And so at that point, rather than go for a certification from some of these other groups, not to say that a certification from them is bad. So I think they're doing valuable work. But I just felt that I needed to engineer, just like I did with the Californios, I needed to engineer my own event. I really feel that I need to engineer my own program with my own exercises, using what I know about horses and how they think and how they feel and their energy. So I've been taking a lot of the different treatments, different modalities of treating PTSD, and then I've designed ways that the horse can deliver those treatments. Treatments may not be the right word, but experiences. So I've broken it into like 3 phases. And the first phase, I'm just entering phase 1 in May. And what I'm going to be doing is I'll be offering 4-hour sessions. They're one-on-one with a person. And I'm going to be using the different exercises that I've developed for that 4-hour session. And it's really just an emotional reset for someone. I can't make any claims that I'm going to fix you. I can't solve your PTSD, whatever. I feel reasonably confident that it will have a very positive, transformative impact on an individual. I know enough about what I plan on doing that I suspect that'll be the case. I'll be using my own horses. I'll probably be having it at my place. There's another facility that was just built. They're very interested in being involved, weather permitting. I might have to use that facility. But I'm going to start that in May, booking these sessions. And then it's really a testing ground, too, for me to get more information about how these things affect people, positive or negative, and a way for people to get involved and kind of get behind the program. So I'll be doing that. And then my end game is I would like to go ahead and form a nonprofit, get some grants in place so that I can offer everything free of charge. Can't do that in the beginning because I got to keep the lights on. But I would like to offer it free of charge. I'd like to focus on veterans and first responders, but I'm not going to limit it to that. I'll have different sessions for different groups. Ultimately end up being probably a 12-day program on site, where they stay here. We do everything for 12 days, and that'll probably be for what I call the tougher cases, folks that are a little more severely impacted. So that's kind of the game plan, the way it is right now. But right now I'm just focusing on phase 1, using the exercises that I've designed, seeing what their impact is, kind of a test run, and then we'll just see where it goes. But I have high hopes for it,
Okay. You mentioned earlier about the gentleman that was coming to your clinics and told you that he had PTSD, and he found he was asymptomatic for several days after going to your clinics. What I'm wondering is what was the catalyst that drove you specifically in this direction? Like there's other, if you wanted to be therapeutic in nature, PTSD is just one choice. So what kind of drew you specifically to this particular candle?
Ask me that question again in a different way so that I'm sure I understand what the question is.
So you mentioned earlier about the gentleman that had come to some clinics and had told you that he had PTSD, and he found, for whatever reason, your clinics gave him some relief from that. I'm wondering what specifically about PTSD drew you in and caused you to go down that particular rabbit hole. So like you could have, chosen to work with children specifically, or autistic kids, or there are a lot of different things within the community of therapeutic type riding and using horses and hippotherapy and all. Some of it's purely physical, some of it's more emotional and mental. So you have this one particular track of PTSD. Was there anything specifically that pulled you in that direction?
Well, I think I've suffered from it, experienced it in the past, and so I have a firsthand understanding of that with regards to it. I've had panic attacks in the past and different situations in my lifetime over the course of my lifetime. I mean, we all experience trauma, right? Like it's part of life. But I understand that there's a segment of the population that has trouble processing that. And given that I had firsthand experience with it, it's probably one thing that made me maybe more sympathetic, where it kind of rang true for me. Also, because of I really believe that storytelling is a great way for us to process our emotions. I think when films went to streaming on, in our living room, that we lost the experience of going to the theater and the lights drop and we identify with the character and their plight appears to be similar to our own, and we get to see them work through it and be successful. I really think that had effect on our brain, could have a positive effect on our brain. So given my interest in story and the transformative power of story, given my history with horses, given my own personal history with PTSD, I think all those things kind of came together, and I thought, this is kind of like the perfect storm. It's really goes back to that question, are we obligated to do the things that we're gifted in our lifetime? I don't know the answer to that question, but I did feel that I had a unique conglomeration of experiences and gifts, if you want to call it a gift or a talent or a skill, that those things could all be knitted together and benefit somebody, so I think that was the appeal.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I kind of had this written down earlier and I skipped over it on purpose, but maybe it plays in here a little bit. So you are, I think anybody listening to this would have to come to the conclusion that you are sort of an eclectic lady with a lot of different talents and skill sets and interests that makes you a pretty unique individual. So I guess I'm most familiar with you through your work in film, using that as your medium. But is that what you would consider your particular medium, or not so much? Like, are you better or more comfortable or more satisfied working one-on-one with people, or maybe in a clinic fashion rather than the removal that you get from film? Is there some aspect of you that makes this the particular formula for you to help in this way rather than another medium?
Yeah, I would say I tend towards engineering experiences that are transformative. That seems to be my life's work. And I've had plenty of them myself, and I do enjoy engineering them in such a way that other people can enjoy that also. So I think film is, given my artistic background, my knowledge of that creatively, I think film is probably a good medium for me to express that. But I will say that the live situation where I walk into the arena to teach clinic, that fuels the knowledge that I need to be able to create something on film, because it's all about my understanding of human nature, my understanding of character, my understanding of how we react in different situations. True character is revealed by the choices we make under pressure. So I enjoy interacting with people one-on-one like that, because I think it deepens my understanding of the human psyche and in all its glory and all its flaws. And so I can then take that information and use it to express that in film. And then hopefully most of the films that I write are all redemptive plots. So it's about, how story and how we heal, collectively. So there's definitely a theme running through it like that. Did that answer your question?
Somewhat, yes, ma'am. And in the best way, added another question. So we haven't talked about it much yet. You've mentioned your screenwriting, but you are also a writer. You've written multiple articles, things like that. And I haven't said this yet, but we will have a link to your website and everything in the show notes so people will be able to find you. It's thecalifornios.com. And she's got a dozen or so articles on there, which I really enjoyed. I like your writing style and everything. But one of the, well, I would say we're very similar people in a lot of different ways. One of the things, like with the film and with podcasting and with writing, you have the ability to edit. And I'm a big editor, particularly with writing. I probably have 12 drafts or something before I put it out there. I really like to be able to go back and change things and move my words around and all. But there is also, and podcasting has that aspect. We can edit this as well, but it also has kind of like clinics. You have that live feel. You're in the moment, and you don't get to restate this. So you kind of, there's almost a risk and an excitement and energy to the conversation because it kind of is live, and you don't get the editing of it. So how do you view that? Like I would consider that a reasonably wide divide in the control aspect of things, because in one you have a great deal of control, and then the other almost none. Well, or you do, but it's fleeting. So I'm not sure how, I'm going on a little journey of talking here, and I have forgotten my question, which is part of the risk of a live conversation.
Right. I get, let me help you out. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I love the live interaction with people because I have moments when information is coming to me and I'm speaking it, and I can't really tell you where it came from. I mean, I don't know if it's divine intervention. I don't know some kind of intuition. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's so pure and it's so right and it's so beautiful. I sometimes can't believe that I said it, like, and that just is it feels like such a gift, and I'll frequently say that in my clinics, like, I don't know where that came from, but it was good, and we all laugh. But I love the live thing because of the opportunity for that to take place. Like, it really only takes place live to me. There's like a flow of some kind going on. And I really enjoy that. So even though, ultimately one day I may transition only into film, I think I'm always going to have my hand in some kind of live performance, some kind of teaching, something like that, because I like discovering things as I go with other human beings, and we get to discover them together. And what an amazing feeling that is, that the particular problem that you just brought to me, I hadn't solved up until this point, but by you bringing me that problem with you or your horse, or, we get to solve it together, kind of join forces. And that's just a beautiful feeling. I love that feeling when it happens. So both things are beautiful to me. Yeah.
It sort of offers you an aspect of connection that you don't get otherwise. And it sounds a lot like riding a horse, too. You get into that state where things just flow, and you're not necessarily focusing on it or concentrating. You're just experiencing and going with. So I guess maybe that's part of the answer to that as well.
Well, and I'd like, up until it's been about 4 years ago, I was writing and teaching, and, I always prided myself on, I would give people the information mechanically and philosophically. Like, I had been to clinics in the past, watched clinics in the past when I was younger, and it was all mechanics, like maybe rein cow, horse guy, or cutter or something. It was all mechanics. And then I'd been to other clinics that was all philosophy. And you're like, yes, that sounds great, but where do I put my hands and where do I put my feet? So I was determined to have my clinics be both, that there was a mechanical element, and then there was also a philosophical element. This is what you do with your body, and this is what you do with your mind, and hopefully what you might do with the horse's mind, understanding how to motivate them. Hardest thing for me to get across was, anybody, I mean, it doesn't take much of a horseman really to get a horse to do something. But if you can get him to do something and like it, boy, now that's tough. Getting him to do it and like that they do it, have a positive attitude, and be willing, open, happy to do it for you. That a true horseman, that's what you have to get. And so there's a lot of horse trainers out there that can force horses to do things, make them do it, and they have that dull look in their eye and they're not very happy about it. And, in my opinion, those folks just aren't there yet. But I will say, for me personally, in my riding experience, I was teaching clinics and I was competent and effective. And my horses were pretty good, they felt pretty good to me. And then about 4 years ago, I was riding. It was at a clinic, and something changed. And it became more difficult for me to talk because I was in a place in my mind with the horse that I was riding, where there were no words. And it was that flow state. It was this beautiful flow state. And I remember experiencing it. And I got through the clinic and I thought, oh, that was maybe a fluke. But from that day on, I've experienced it repeatedly. Different horses, different days, different clinics, different places. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm older than 50. I've been riding my whole life. And it took all that time to get to that point. And if there's a liability in not starting early with your riding, that would be one, that you just have to do it long enough that you can get to that point. Had I started riding when I was 20, I wouldn't have gotten to that point. My riding career would be over, or I'd be dead before I would have reached that point. So I'm grateful for it. It changed me forever. I can definitely say I ride differently now. My horses feel different now. I'm in a different place in my mind when I ride now. Well, it was a big turning point.
What kind of horses do you ride? Are you ranch bred quarter horses?
They're most of them are. I like appendix horses, believe it or not. I had a thoroughbred mare I bred every other year and accumulated a handful of her colts that I've kept all of them. So I like a horse that can cover a little bit of ground but still handle themselves. Nice willowy shoulder, smooth through that. I also like, but they're all crossed on kind of cow horse bred quarter horses, But I like that cross. So that's probably the horses that I like are like that. I mean, I love riding a nice cow horse bred horse too, or these big dressage horses are fun too. I mean, it's just, they're all different, but my personal horses, that's what they are.
So do you have anything that you're bringing along at this point, or are they all sort of bridle horses and solid citizens?
I've got one I'm kind of bringing along, I guess you could say. I've got quite a few retirees. I have this bad habit, like They help me make my living, and they're great to me. And we travel all over, the United States and beyond together. And then when they can't go anymore, I just personally feel like I kind of owe it to them to keep them around. So they're kicked out on the place. So I've got quite the group of pensioners. I've got a couple young horses, but I don't have a lot of horses anymore. In my heyday, maybe only had 25 head. Now I've got like 10 or 11.
Well, for your PTSD stuff, those pensioners might be pretty valuable at this point too. So
yeah, they'll be perfect. Yep, they'll be absolutely perfect for that. Yeah.
Well, have you done much letting other people ride your horses at clinics? Are you one of the clinicians that does that, or not so much?
I can't say that I've never done it. I don't do it a lot. Every once in a while, a unique situation would take place where I'd swap with somebody. But most of the time, I'd ride mine and they'd ride theirs, but I didn't swap a lot of the time. Usually it was something like, I always tell folks, and not to give you a canned answer, but if you're interested in a particular discipline, maybe it's dressage, maybe it's jumping, maybe it's cutting, reining, whatever it might be. I always tell folks, okay, I want you to go to the top trainer of that particular discipline that you can find in your area, and I want you to pay him whatever it takes to ride the best horse he'll let you on for a day, and I want you to take a lesson. And I want you to feel what that horse feels like. Because you have aspirations that you want to come back and teach your horse to do that. Okay, feel what that feels like. Get that burned into your brain. What it feels like for a horse to stop like that. What it feels like for them to turn around. What it feels like for them to, whatever it might be. And then you go back and you ride your horse. And as you're schooling them through the years of schooling your horse, there'll be a moment when he feels like that. And you'll recognize it and you'll reward it. Had you not gone and ridden a horse that did it well, you may not have recognized it. You may not have rewarded it and missed an opportunity. So every once in a while, if I felt like someone needed to feel what something felt like, I might put them on my horse and give them a little bit of instruction so they could feel what it was supposed to feel like, for example. But most of the time not,
And are you still doing some clinics?
Yeah, I do some horsemanship clinics, and I do a couple cow working clinics through the year. Keep it simple. I am trying to build the equine assisted trauma sessions. So because of that, I'm kind of feathering one in and the other out. But I'm still going to be doing horsemanship clinics probably for a while. I tell folks, if you want to come to one, come now, because if my film career takes off, we get financing, I'm gonna be gone shooting a movie for a year, so you never know what life has ahead of you, but I'm sure I'll always have a hand in it in some way.
Oh man, that made me think of another question for you too.
So go for it. Lay it on me.
So as you're doing clinics and all, what are some of the common things, the most common but unrecognized problems that you see?
Well, number one would be ego. You can't have two of you in the saddle, right? The ego has to go. So ego gets folks in a lot of trouble. They want to look good. They want what they already know to be right. That's a big one. They're riding a horse that isn't the right horse for them, and I tell them so. And they don't want to believe me, and I get that, but I feel it's my obligation to be truthful and evaluate what they're riding and whether or not I think that horses that they are set up for success. And I'm not opposed to difficult horses. I'm not saying that the horse gives you a little trouble that you should jump ship. I don't believe that. But at the same time, the person has to live in reality, because if you don't live in reality, horses will surely teach you to. So, if I have someone show up and they're 65 years old and they've just had back surgery and they've got a 2.5-year-old Hancock bred colt that has 3 rides on them, and they've only ridden 5 times in their life. I'm going to go, you know what, this probably isn't going to work out. So, and they'll get mad or what have you. So I would say losing the ego and operating in reality would be my first kind of pet peeve that way, first difficulty. And the next one, I'm going to give you 3. The next one is people don't ride with enough contrast. I touched on that earlier. And what that means is in order for the horse to feel anything, we always feel in relation to something else, right? We feel heat. If our hand is cold, we feel it more intensely. It's the contrast between the 2 things that allow us to feel. So most of the people I know that don't ride well don't ride with enough contrast. And that means the pocket of relief that they build isn't great enough, isn't big enough. You design an exercise for a horse, you design a movement, you should already know ahead of time what the pocket of relief will be. What does the horse need to do to be able to find that pocket of relief? If it's always there for them consistently, they'll always have a willing attitude because they'll trust. They'll keep searching until they find it without anxiety. So maybe a person that doesn't ride with enough contrast doesn't apply the pressure that's required, ramp up the pressure that's required to motivate the horse to find the pocket of relief. And the pocket of relief isn't great enough. And what happens is their riding is just kind of beige, there's no contrast. It's they're kind of grinding along. They're applying a spur and kind of grinding it on them and picking on them, or and I would say that they're not using their body enough. They're stiff. They're not riding with enough physicality. That would be the third. They think that they could get on the horse and that they're riding something and the horse is doing the physical part. No, riding requires an awareness of your body, being able to isolate, pat your head and rub your belly. I mean, it's a physical thing and it requires a certain amount of physicality. People don't work enough on that. So that would be the 3 things, really. So ego getting in the way, first of all, not riding with enough contrast and not understanding that riding horses is a physical experience and that your body you need to work on your body and work on your physicality and work on your knowledge of your body and your ability to isolate, pick up a hip, move your body posture, adjust your spine, adjust your pelvis. Those would be 3 anyway.
Well, that may have tied in with the next question I was going to ask you about some advice that you would have, but bringing back your film background here, I have often thought that the easily available access to video, everybody's got a phone with a video recorder in their pocket now. Do you feel like that's played a big impact on the horse world? Because just like I've had many instances where you'll have a customer that almost doesn't believe you when you tell them something. My hands aren't high. What are you talking about?
Yes.
Okay, well,
yeah.
why don't you watch this little video that I just took of you and tell me if you think you look like you're riding a Harley or not?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So,
No, I definitely, well, I think it's had an impact on society in general, but yes, definitely. I think it's been helpful, I do. Just because you can self-evaluate, right? You can stick it on a tripod and ride and then evaluate yourself or take it to someone else to help evaluate you. So yeah, no, I think that's been good. It's sometimes humbling. I know one year we did a clinic. It was our open clinic. We had 6 guys in it. And I said, Dave, I'm going to video it. He said, great. So I got my camera out and I videoed each guy's turn. And then we went in the house after and put it on the TV and played everybody's deal. Dead silence. And we were talking to the students the same way we talk to them when we're out doing the clinic. See here, you kind of your hips over here and you're not getting your arm, you're only using the front half of your swing, whatever. dead silence. Nobody's saying a word. Finally, one of the clinic students was also a friend of ours. And I said, boy, Mike, you guys are all being pretty quiet. Everybody looked at each other and Mike said, well, we all thought we were quite a bit better than we are. And they weren't that bad, but we have an image of ourselves on how we think we look, but that's not necessarily the reality. So I think having a video like that, being able to self-evaluate, keeps us on the straight and narrow, keeps us a little more truthful. So yeah, I think it's good. Good opportunity.
An incredible tool. Yes, ma'am. I kind of had the opposite experience when I was still apprenticing. Got to the point where I was getting drugged to shows and things like that, and I hit a zone there where I leveled up a bit, and I got where I was really starting to feel the horse a lot better, and it actually caused me to get pretty insecure because I was feeling all kinds of problems that I wasn't previously aware of, and this was back in the 90s when a camcorder was this big 25-pound box that you had to put on your shoulder and everything. And one of my customers had one and came and filmed me riding his horse and then made a VHS copy and sent it back to me. And he did it in pretty short order. I had it within a couple of days of the ride. So the ride was still pretty fresh in my mind. And I got to go watch it. And it helped me with my confidence a lot because I realized you couldn't see all these things I was feeling at this point. It didn't look as bad as I thought it was going to. So it kind of had the opposite effect for me.
Yeah, but that's good. I think that's a good sign anyway. Yeah, that's fun.
Anyway, well, like I say, we will have links to your stuff in the show notes. I certainly wish you the best with your therapy program, and I don't know off the top of my head what I could possibly do to help you with that, but if you do think of anything, please let me know, and I would be most glad to do whatever I can do. If you start looking for funds or something like that, I'm happy to spread that out on my social media platforms and kind of spread the word for you as much as I can anyway.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really do appreciate it. I think it's I'm hopeful that things go well with it, and we'll just give it a try, and see what happens. At the end of it, I'm sure I'll have a lot more information, and I'm confident that I think there'll be some positive impact. I hope so. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and I very much enjoyed the conversation with you here. I think a whiskey and a campfire, we could probably go for a long time talking horse philosophy and all of that. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast, and hope we get to ride together somewhere down the road.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. It's been a great opportunity to talk to some of your listeners maybe, and I wish you and everybody listening all the best in your riding career. Stay open and stay positive, and look forward to seeing everybody down the road, hopefully.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.